Welcome to a Greenville County Library System virtual event. This is Job Interviewing 101, how to prepare and answer questions like a pro. I'm Rachel, and I'm the Adult Outreach and Event Coordinator for the library system. I'm so pleased that you've joined us this evening. Whether you're here live or watching the recording later, thanks for being here. If you'd like to see more events like this one, make sure that you check out greenvillelibrary.org/events. That's our event calendar, has listings for all ages and all times, so make sure that you go there and register for an event. If you're watching this recording, you might be interested in other ones. Check out greenvillelibrary.org/adult virtual activities, and you can see all of the different playlists on topics available. Tonight, we're joined by Craig Muss, a retired career coach and consultant who has years of executive experience. He's going to guide us on our journey to getting that interview and really nailing those interview questions. Thank you so much for being here this evening, Craig.
Thank you, Rachel. And good evening, everybody. I'm not going to go through every single detail on a slide because that would take too much time. I'm going to really touch on highlights, but I think it will get you thinking of some good questions that you can translate back to Rachel. And then I'll make sure and answer either at when I'm presenting that topic, or we can do it at the end. Okay, so I'll go into a little bit more detail about me. I've got a handout tip that I've created, 10 tips to get the job you want. One of those 10 is how to interview like a pro. So I wanted to just give that to you. It's been very successful for the students and the adults that I work with and volunteer with to help them with career changes, with their first jobs, changing jobs, getting employed if they were unemployed. So it'll help you all. I'm going to go through interviewing basics, walk you through the interview process, talk about technical skills versus soft skills, the importance of really knowing the job that you're interviewing for. I'll give you a technique on how to work backwards from a job posting to really prepare for an interview, and then make sure and go through typical questions that will be asked to you in an interview. I have interviewed on college campuses and have hired students right off of out of the universities. I've hired experienced people. I probably have interviewed hundreds, have hired at least 100 people in my overall career. I graduated about 40 years ago in 1981, so it's maybe before several of you were born, but have had a lot of experience in this and have decided as a retiree to give back with all this knowledge that I have so that I can help others, help the community. I go through questions that HR managers and hiring managers will ask you. Make sure that you understand the difference between a behavioral-based question and a typical question. And then I've got some tips for you that I'll highlight, 20 tips on how to prepare for an interview, and then make sure that I go through, give you questions, to go through your questions. Okay, a little bit about me. First of all, if you want to get LinkedIn with me, this is just a screenshot of my LinkedIn page, and you can look me up, Craig Muss, and you can read about me. If you want to get to know more specifics than just my resume, at the bottom of my LinkedIn page are people that I've worked with, but most recently, probably at least 20, maybe even 30 recommendations that students have written once I've done work with them as a career coach, so you can understand what I did, how I did it, and how it helped them. So if you want to learn more about me, that may be a good way. It's kind of think about the star system on Amazon with 5 stars versus 1 star, Google stars, that kind of stuff. It just describes what a little bit about me. So I am a degreed engineer. As I mentioned, I graduated about 40 years ago. I'm a 3rd generation engineer. My son is a 4th generation. He's a mechanical just like his dad. I was sharing with Rachel that we're here in Greenville about 7.5 years. We've had 10 homes. We've lived all over, traveled all over the world, and have lived in Germany internationally for 3 years. So have a lot of experience. Actually, this should say we're married 39. This is a little bit older slide. Next year we'll be 40. 2 children, 31 and 30, do a lot of yoga, do a lot of walking, hiking up in Paris Mountain and Table Rock. And since I retired, as I mentioned, I want to give back to the community and give back to students to help the next generation. And so I do a lot of volunteering work at North Greenville, up in Tigerville, at Clemson, USC Upstate, NC State. Have also worked with Purdue and Anderson. So there's been a few others Anderson University. So I probably spend about 10 to 15 hours a week on average, sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less. Sometimes there's some weeks that are quiet. The summers tend to be quiet with career coaching. But if there's anyone who wants to reach out after the class that's looking for some advice, you're welcome to go do that. And I volunteer my services. Okay. So I'm not going to go through this. This is the path to get the job that you want here. And I'm not going to go through all these, but one of these is how to prepare for an interview and typical questions that you should be prepared to ask. That's one of the last question that typically a recruiter or an employer will ask is, do you have any questions? Right? So you need to be prepared with good questions. So on my tip sheet down here, number 9 is have questions for an employer. And one of them that I have listed here is, what do you like best, least about your XYZ company and your position, right? So that's just one. So you can look at this on your own time, but this can help you through really getting the job, right? So it's more than just interviewing. Okay, interviewing basics. This over here. What are employers trying to learn about you? So one of the things that I always look for, and you usually determine this in the first 5 minutes of could be a phone interview, it could be a live interview, is how well prepared did you come to the interview, right? If you appear to look like you've done your research and you look calm and you are ready to and excited and high energy, the interviewer can pick that up, right? If you're squirming, if you look nervous, if you're not looking a person in the eye, if you didn't try and shake someone's hand when you first met them, those kinds of things, those kind of set the tone at the beginning of the interview. So really come prepared, be ready, be calm. Mentioned body language, whether you're looking, squirming, looking nervous, you're shaking because you're really scared about the interview, not necessarily a good sign. Did you make an effort to look your best? Okay. Now, I think you need to dress accordingly. If you're applying for a manager's position, you probably want to dress very formally. If you're applying for a position in a factory, it's probably business casual. Even if you were at a different job and you were, had coveralls on, and you had grease in your hands and all those other things, which happen in your job, clean up, come, show the effort that you've cleaned up, come in some business casual to the next interview. People are judging you on how you speak, how you collect your thoughts, how you deal with a stressful situation. An interview is a stressful situation. Work can be a very stressful situation when you get last minute deadlines and someone says you weren't ready to go home and someone said, I need this by the morning, right? How do you deal with that situation? How do you interact and socialize? And when I've worked for several companies in my career, I think I counted 9, which is quite a lot. But in some of the companies that I worked for, part of the interview process was going out to dinner with a group, right? So there was, how did I interact? How well did I socialize? So important things to consider and to be prepared for. Be prepared to handle difficult questions, and I'll go through those with you, give you some examples. Making sure you know about the job and the company. Do your homework, really important to be able to successfully interview. Know yourself. Like someone may say, what are your strengths? Those should just roll off your tongue, right? Or tell me about what your weaknesses are. And you could say I'm a perfectionist, right? So a lot of people use that as a line, which is not really a weakness. But you could say, I'm a really hard worker, and sometimes, I don't look up at the clock, and before I know it, it's like 9 o'clock at night. I just work too hard. I need to work-life balance is hard for everybody. It's hard for me too, right? And that's really a truth. You don't say, well, I break down every time I'm given a hard assignment, because you probably won't get the job, right? So, there's being honest and there's being smart about your honest answer. How ready are you to make a move, right? Someone's going to ask you, you're employed or maybe you're not employed. You've been looking for a while. How soon are you ready to start, right? Or what do you need to be able to start? You need to make sure that you have a good answer. And again, why do you want to work for a company? And what do you bring to this company? Like, why should we hire you? That's a very typical question from an employer. Okay, let me just move these little screenshots around. So I'm going to focus on soft skills. In this presentation, I put some links here that you can click on to better understand skills that employers are looking for. People can teach technical skills. Like when let's say I was a manager and I was hiring and I was looking for someone who was organized, who could juggle multiple priorities. That's something that you develop over your life. It's very difficult to teach someone how to be organized. And you can give some tools like time management, how to file accordingly to keep things structured. But when your boss gives you 5 or 6 different jobs, or they want to know that an employee or a new hire can handle 5 or 6 different jobs, they're looking for someone who can jump in and go do that, right? So they're looking for skills that you have developed in your environment as you've grown up, or you have developed on other jobs, as opposed to technical jobs. Let's say, I'll use an example like BMW and assembling cars in Greer, right? They'll teach you how to do that. You can learn how to do that. It's difficult to learn how to be, BMW can't teach you how to be organized, right? They can send you to a time management class, but as far as like getting a lot of work done in a short period of time, that's something that you're really born with. It's in your genes or it's not in your genes. Okay, so examples of soft skills are, and I got these just by doing some research online, your leadership skills and your ability to persuade people. How do you analyze problems or be quantitative in being able to put numbers to things? How curious are you? How well do you learn? How do you learn? Can you see the big picture, right? Or do you get stuck in the details? Your communication skills or soft skills. Computer technical skills is probably more on the technical side. A positive attitude, strong work ethic, problem solving and creativity, teamwork, and being able to perform under pressure, right? So if you were looking for a short list of what I think, you could be being a plumber, being an engineer, being an accountant, being a coordinator at the Greenville Library System. When Rachel was getting hired, I bet there were several of these skills that they were looking for when they made decisions on hiring Rachel based on this set. Okay. This goes back to knowing the job. All right. So this is just a simple table. And if you're applying to a job online, they list the requirements that they have, okay, in the ad. All I did, and this is generic, this is like sorting out all the different elements that an employer is looking for. So before you even apply for the job, you can use this for submitting an application with a resume, using it for a cover letter, but even using it for the interview process, against everything on the left-hand column that the employer is looking for, you should summarize in bullet points how you meet that requirement. So think about this as an inventory check, right? So on the left side is what the employer wants. This is what you have. So if you can fill this out, this simple table out, and you feel like you have some really strong responses over here to the position, that means that you're a very good candidate to be considered for the job. Because at the end of the day, when I'm talking to my students, I always tell them, this is what it comes down to in the mind of a hiring manager. which is how well does this candidate fit my position requirements? So you're just making it easy for them by doing this work and sorting it out ahead of time. And if you organize how you interview with this company or how your resume is built based on this is what they're looking for, these are keywords that they're looking for, and this is the skills that you have, you're increasing your chances to get the job. Okay, so this is that, it's like the grand prize of this. One thing you take away in this presentation is this simple tool will help you a lot to be prepared and to get the job. Okay, so I'm going to break out questions into two types, general versus behavioral, right? So let me give you some examples. So I'll just use Rachel's name. So Rachel, why don't you tell me about yourself? Or can you walk me through your resume? Or what do you know about our company? Or why would you like to work for us? Or why should we hire you? Or how do team members describe you, right? Those are one answer, one sentence, two sentence answers, maybe. They're very straightforward. And in an interviewer's mind, when they're asking you these questions, they're mentally checking yes or no, is this a good candidate by asking that question, okay? And do you have any questions, right? That's the other general question. Behavioral-based questions, which you can Google, and I have a lot of material in this deck for you, is can you tell me about a time? Or can you describe a situation where you disagreed with a team member and how you influenced that team member to come to your recommendation? It's a more complex question, right? And they're trying to put you in situations to understand what your behavior interacts in that situation based on your past experiences. Okay. So just we're still doing some background. So that's just general questions versus behavioral-based questions. So the first, typically, human resources does the screening for the hiring managers, right? Now, there are computer systems, so like Indeed, ZipRecruiter, LinkedIn. When an employer, I'll use BMW as an example, when BMW pays for an ad on Indeed, they get what is called a tool that's called an applicant tracking system. It's called ATS. You can all Google that if you want. And what that does is BMW puts what they're looking for, the keywords that they're looking for in the job, like 5 years of experience, welding, electrical, whatever those keywords are. And the computer systems on Indeed then sort out and rank resumes to give a short stack to a human resource person that then does the next screening, right? So it's really, the overall heading is artificial intelligence. That's what it is. And in computer terms, it's called applicant tracking system. So that's actually before this first block here. But assuming that the HR is screening in like the old days, I'd look through 100 resumes, right? They're looking to screen out, the HR is looking to screen out the best 5 or 10% to make sure that the hiring manager who's busy, their job is doing other things. HR is to go do a lot of things too, besides just hire, but they want to make sure that the best candidates are the only ones that are screened by the hiring manager. And what they're looking for what I used to work for Kellogg's company in the cereal division, and they used to hammer this in our heads, is what in the interview process, you're looking for can do, will do, and fit, right? So can the person do the job? Do they come across as that they're really willing to do that work and work for the company? And then the fit is the culture, right? How well did they interact? How well if I was a hiring manager, how well do I think that they'd interact with me as the manager or the team members that are on the team that they're going to be working with? Okay, so that's HR is looking at that. The hiring manager or the team that does the interview, right, is also looking, get this out of the way, is also screening for can do, will do, fit, but they're very specifically looking at technical competencies, They're looking for a person's ability to learn, right? Because you're going to have to learn the job. You're going to have to do the job. That's the can do. Transfer, how well can you transfer skills to others, right? You could be, if you're applying for I'll use it as a welding job, you could be the best welder in the world. You are more valuable if you can teach others how to weld, right? Than just being the expert welder, right? You're more valuable. And then when companies hire, great companies don't just hire to fill the position for today. They are thinking ahead for their future and say, can Mary or can Alexa or can Rachel be someone who could grow in this company and be a leader 5 or 10 years from now? I mean, no one's just hire. I guess there are needs where I have to plug a hole and I need to fill a position, like I need a waitress because I can't serve enough tables. So I need a waitress at this restaurant. And if this person leaves, I'll get another waitress. But in most companies, they're looking for people who can grow to be supervisors, managers, executives, right? So that's the future potential. So these are, I'm not going to go through all of these. These are just examples of, and you can Google, there's a lot more of them. Describe a situation in which you were able to use persuasion to successfully convince someone to see things your way, right? Give me an example of a time when something you tried to accomplish and failed. Tell me about a time when you missed an obvious solution to a problem. And so, I guess this list may have, 20 or so behavioral questions. You cannot be prepared. You cannot write out 100 potential answers and know exactly what an interview is going to ask you. There's just no way. But I would say that many of the answers to any one of these questions can fit many other questions, right? So when you when someone asks you, describe a situation in which you were able to use persuasion to successfully convince someone to see things your way, the answer to that probably can fit, describe a time when you anticipated potential problems and developed preventative measures. Okay. So once you get familiar on how to answer these types of questions, if the company is using them, and many companies do, because walk me through your resume is a very easy question. Give me an example of a time when you used your fact-finding skills to solve a problem is a much more difficult question and really makes an employer very aware on how you organize your thought, how you present, how you communicate. So many companies use behavioral-based questions, especially if they're a large company on the large side. Okay, so that's a big list for you. All right, so how do you organize your thoughts for a behavioral-based question? And you can Google this. It's called the STAR methodology, and the STAR is an acronym. And it stands for situation, task, action, result, right? So if we go back to a question here, give me an example of when you showed initiative and took the lead, right? So the recruiters or the hiring managers are trained to listen to these 4 aspects, right? So they're waiting to hear about that. So they want to hear the situation or the task or the action. A lot of times, normally you'll answer the first 3, but you'll never really talk about what the result is. And at the end of the day, employers are looking for results. So I'm going to just show you. Actually, the end, I'll jump back here. Okay, so I have when I work with students, I'll make this bigger, and I did not include this. I can send this to you if you want, Rachel. So this is a student that I prepared, did a mock interview training with, and he is an aerospace engineer up at North Carolina State, the Wolfpacks. And so I gave him the questions for the mock interview, but what I wanted to show you, which I really was very impressed by, so I gave him a behavioral-based question, which was, tell me about a time you had a conflict in work and how you resolved it, okay? And what he did was to have this cheat sheet in front of him, and I'll go back to my PowerPoint in a minute and show you how to use a cheat sheet, was he put the S, the T, the A, and the R, and he organized his bullet point short answers based on the situations, right? So he's worked at this racing company up in Charlotte that makes racing automotive parts, and says, most projects I worked on at this company, RYMS, required a lot of teamwork to complete. So the situation is a team assignment that requires a lot of teamwork. The task was, one project stands out because it had a model a quality assurance part with guidance from two people who greatly disliked each other. This caused tension and led to miscommunication when I was creating this part, right? So that's the task, right? So you had to resolve that. The action was, I wound up implementing a system that kept track of the project details. And the result was there was more accountability on everyone and less confusion as to why the project took on the shape that it did, right? So it's just putting this before your bullet points and then writing out your sentences is a great way to organize. Now, call BMW. Is BMW going to ask the question, tell me about a time you had a conflict in work and how you resolved it? I don't know, but conflict is a real thing at work. And I would say, I'd be a betting person that there'd be some type of question about a conflict with a team member, a conflict with a project that wasn't successful, that you could use that same response for using the STAR. Okay, so Rachel, I will email this to you so you can send this out as an example, right? It also has the other questions which are going to be in my PowerPoint. All right, so let me go back to where I was. Okay. This is just some more tips on STAR that you can read. These are just examples. I'm going to give you the student that I'm working with at North Carolina State for a mock interview, but these are just examples of situation, task responses, actions, and results. Again, you can Google more on the STAR methodology for behavioral-based questions. But if you pick some of those questions, right? Like, tell me about a time that you had a conflict with a team. Or before you start writing responses, think back about, it could be family experiences. And when I tell my I'll call them mentees, because I do a lot of mentoring and coaching. When I'm interviewing, the person is not listening to the specifics and grading you on how difficult that problem was with the team. They're really listening to how well you organize your thoughts. And did you touch on the S, the T, the A, and the R? So don't get too hung up on, oh, is this example good enough? It's kind of irrelevant. The person is really listening through your presentation, your answers, in trying to judge, this person thinks in an organized way. They presented their thoughts well. They answered exactly what I asked, right? So, but if you can, think about recent situations that show favorable behaviors or actions. It could be coursework, work experience, leadership, volunteering, things that have happened in your home. It doesn't matter where the example took place. It should just be your best example to present. Okay, so if you had a difficult situation and you were not successful and you failed, that would not be the example to use with the interview. Pick one where you did succeed. Pick your best, right? You're showing your best, all right? And then this is the bullet points. Prepare short descriptions of each situation. Be sure the story has a beginning, middle, and the end. And if you follow the STAR method, it will. Be sure the outcome or result reflects positively on you, right? The person should go at the end of your S, the T, the A, and the R, goes, wow, great answer, great thinking, great presentations, okay? Be specific, don't generalize about several events, be very specific about that one event. Okay, I'll share an interesting story with another North Carolina student, but in my mock interview training that I do with my students or with, I work with adults too. I send them the questions ahead of time, right? And you go, well, why did you do that? That's not real world. And I'm like, well, because we have to start somewhere. I have to get the person comfortable in knowing what potentially is going to be asked, right? So typically the first question is, please tell me why don't you tell me about yourself? Like Rachel, why don't you tell me about yourself, right? So you probably, I hope you've heard the term of elevator pitch. You're meeting somebody's, maybe you've had, Rachel, you've done lectures on how to do an elevator pitch. That'd be an interesting one for people too. But you're stuck in an elevator, you're meeting someone important, you want to get a job with someone. What are you going to say in 2 minutes to really impress them that someone you met for the first time? That's kind of the elevator. You're stuck in an elevator. So that's tell me about yourself. I always suggest to people, you should know your strengths, right? I think it's a great way to start. And just say, let me tell you about my strengths. I'm organized. Now, I probably would use some of the keywords in the job description that was online. If that's really you, to say, I'm a great communicator. I'm a family person. I've got 3 kids. I'm raising them to be great people, whatever. Your strengths, things that are really positive. What I also present is, and I'll use an analogy like a book, which is when you pick up a book that you've never read before and no one's told you about. If the author doesn't catch your interest in the first couple of pages, you're going to put it down. So you want to be as positive as you possibly can with your best examples towards the top third of this list of questions. So they're going to want to know more. Because if you answer the question, tell me about yourself, and it's not positive, and let's say you blow that question and you blow the second one, which is, how about walking me through your resume? That interviewer may not want to even go through and might end the whole interview, right? They may say, okay, let's stop. So first impressions, that's what it's about. And I was trained that people who are interviewing are usually nervous, and you want to start out easy with that person. And so give them easy questions. And those are very typical 2 easy questions. Tell me about yourself and walk me through your resume. So if you take this list and you copy and paste it into a Word document or Google Doc or whatever, jot down some bullet points, right? And that's what Austin, which Rachel will send you, that's what he did, right? He came up with a couple of bullet points that he tried to memorize the answers to, and I'll show you a picture where you can just tape this to the side of your laptop if you're Zooming, where you could have a split screen on your laptop and have your cheat sheet over to the right, or you could have it on your desk in front of you. But if you get nervous, you can glance to it and go, oh, let me think about that question. And you're really looking at your cheat sheet and use those bullet points and get you back on track. Okay. The next one, tell me about a time you had a conflict where conflict is normal. People don't get along. People don't agree. There's going to be some question like that that's going to ask you. Work is stressful. They're going to know how you deal with stress. That's the next question. Can you detail a mistake you made and how you reacted to it? People make mistakes. We're all human. Tell me about a time when you performed well under enormous pressure, right? That's kind of another stress question. Give me an example of a goal you could not meet and how you handled it. I like this question because when I practice with people, sometimes they'll get really negative on their bosses, like or former bosses. What did you like least about your last company and your last boss? Please don't go negative, right? Because you are telling that other company that, boy, how are they going to feel when they come in here? That's kind of like a warning sign. So, I've listened to what people said about their bosses and say, some example, like I've had some great bosses. I've had some not so great bosses. Remember, I didn't say crappy bosses. Has not so great bosses. And I've learned from all of them, right? And I try to pick and choose the best things from every single person that I've worked for. Okay, so politicians spin. I don't know if you've ever heard that term, spin. They don't necessarily answer the question 100% directly, you can do that too. Position yourself to answer the question so that it's always as positive as possible. That's what human resources, that's what hiring managers want to hear. Okay, just want to pay attention to the time. Okay, so what's your least favorite work task that you dread to do? So these two are kind of like, I've come up with those questions because it's like reverse psychology. It's a lot easier to ask you, what's the favorite thing you like to do? Okay, it's a lot harder because most people don't want to go negative. So I'm really trying to get somebody's head to say, well, what don't you like? Because we might have that work at the job that you're interviewing with today. And boy, I'm not going to want to continue on interviewing you in the future because you just told me that you hate doing mundane tasks, right? It's like, I want to be welding all day. Well, I got to do some paperwork when I'm doing welding or programming or whatever. I have to go to team meetings or things like that. So don't go negative. So, what's your least favorite work task? Again, it's like what I mentioned before. I've had good bosses, I've had bad bosses. The thing I would probably answer it as a positive. The things that I'm really passionate about are ABC, and I know that there's other things that I need to do, but I focus on the ABC in the job, right? Instead of going negative. I know that most companies ask, why do you want to come work for us? So you got to do the homework. You've got to look at their websites. Usually companies have mission and vision statements. You can read about, competitors of companies. You can read financial analyses of companies that they're, developing great products. Imagine Pfizer, right? Pfizer developed the COVID vaccine, right? And now they've kind of come up with a COVID pill if you get COVID, right? And you can say that, I want to work for a leading pharmaceutical company that's really making a difference in the world, right? Or you could say, Pfizer's, I read Pfizer's mission and I can really relate to that because I see how you really want to take third world countries and really advance their health and advance their economy and make the world a better place, right? So doing your homework and knowing what's important to the company and being able to play that back to them is really important. So why do you want to work for us? Again, why should we, now I tend to put it right back on the person who's being interviewed. Why should we hire you? Okay. So that's like that elevator pitch. So tell me about yourself. Like, why should we hire you? And this is the easiest picture at the end of an interview is think about that table, which is here's the position requirements and here's what I have, right? That's a great way to answer that without saying, oh, let me pull out the table and let me read to you that I can match every single one of your requirements. And you can just say, in your job position, you ask for ABC, right? And let me just review with you again that I have those. I've got 5 years of experience in doing this. I know this programming language. I worked for 7 hotels. I've worked internationally and things like that. So again, you want to try and match up and make sure that they leave at the end that you have a great fit, that inventory of what they wanted versus what you have. And then, do you have any questions for me? Which goes back to that 10-tip sheet. You can Google great questions to ask in an interview. I will tell you, you'll get 2 minutes, right? So you can come up with 10 questions, you'll get 1 or 2. So, and my son is there. My son is out of school 7 years. He's worked for 4 companies and I've coached him through all 4. So I've had a lot of personal experience in this too. And what I always coach him is come up with the important list, not just questions for the sake of questions. Like, how are you going to decide company A versus company B? What's important to you? Ask as much time as they give you, ask the questions that you've given time for. At the end of the day, if they offer you the job, make sure that you ask all those questions to the hiring manager before you say yes and go work for them. Because the last time you can ask is once you say yes, right? But save the questions until you have your salary offer and the job offer in writing and say, I have some follow-up questions. I just want to make sure. If you ask too many questions too early on, they may say, boy, this person's really scaring me. Once they've made the offer, you're safe. Does that Rachel, I see you shaking your head. So I would hope that that makes sense to all of you. Okay, so this is just a picture over here of my laptop in my office and how you can type out your answers and tape it to the side. And with my little webcam here, you can't see these sheets, right? You can put them there. You can put them in the front of your laptop. Some people, again, as I mentioned, they'll just split their screen. Okay, so I'm going to talk you through an example, and this is a really great one from, I'm going to pay attention to time, Jimmy John. So I did a mock interview and I used the question, can you tell me about a time when you had a major challenge at work and how you resolved the problem? And this Jacob, who's an industrial engineering student up at North Carolina State, gave me this example saying, you know, I work part-time at Jimmy John's, right? So he didn't use a college example, didn't use an industrial engineering example. He used Jimmy John's, right? So it doesn't matter, right? I'm the interviewer. I'm just listening. And so he said, I picked up, we're working the sandwich line. We picked up the phone. An irate customer said, you know, you're supposed to be freaky fast. I have not had my sandwich in 45 minutes and yelling and screaming and upset. And the person said, we'll get the meal right out to you, sir. Really apologize. Sorry, hung up, went to the line. He said, I looked down and I saw that the sandwich ticket had fallen on the floor and no one had made the sandwich. So I immediately told the manager what happened. We got the sandwich. We bypassed other people's delivery. We got the sandwich out there. And at the end, I said, you know, guys, we got to figure out a way not to lose these tickets so this doesn't happen again. Right, that was his star, the situation, the task, the action, and the result was that he thought about at the end like continuous improvement, which is always a thing that employers are looking for, that you can think through, how do we do it better next time, or how do we prevent this from happening again? And I give a score when I'm doing mock interview training. I said, Jacob, I'm going to give you a 4. He goes, how come I didn't get a 5? And I said, because I'm going to give you bonus points. What if you said to your boss, you know, why don't we give this sandwich to this customer for free because we made the mistake? What if I gave him, you know, free chips for a month? I talked to the boss. Imagine how that person would feel if we went way out of our way to make good on the mistake that we made, and that they told all their friends, and we grew the Jimmy John's business because I was thinking like a marketing salesperson and not just like a sandwich maker, right? And he goes, you know, that's really good. I never really thought about that. So coming back to reality here, which is a real example, he did use Jimmy John's. When you're thinking about, you're doing your STAR preparation, you should be thinking about the action, the result at the end isn't just that you solved the problem, you convinced a team successfully how to change their mind, you resolved an issue that was very difficult that no one could solve before. It's how did you think about, how can we do it better the next time? What was our lessons learned? How could we take this and do better things in the future? So I'll call that bonus points. And that would really blow the interviewer away if they hear that kind of thinking, right? So it is like, I'll use a welding example. So I welded up, the axle in the truck, but I've been doing this same repair 14 times in the last week. I decided that we need to get to the root cause. So I called a bunch of people together and we figured out that it wasn't cast at the foundry correctly, so that we stopped this defect from happening. And the company ended up saving $10,000 a year in claims or defects or repairs, right? So if you can do that in your job and think bigger about the business and make things better, they'll love that when you're interviewing. Okay, so that's my Jimmy John's and the extra chips or free sandwiches for a month or whatever. Okay, so how to prepare for an interview. I think I touched on a lot of these things. Research the industry and the company. Make sure you know what your strengths are, what your selling points are. You should know yourself. Anticipate the interview's concerns and reservations, right? So let's say you have a friend who works at a company and that's how you got this interview, you want to find out through the back door, what are the issues that are going on in that company, so that you can maybe incorporate that or weave that into how you answer or reply. Prepare for common interview questions. I gave you examples. Line up your questions for the interviewer. Practice, practice, practice in front of the mirror, with family, with friends. Do it, record yourself on the webcam, watch on your PC, watch yourself, critique yourself, take notes, do it over and over again. I mentioned this before, score a success in the first 5 minutes. That's that book example. Make sure that you've got them interested. So I'm not going to go through all these things. Send a thank you note and a follow-up short email, and don't give up. Right. So my son is interviewing with a company in Georgia. He's met with 9 different people. He's applied for 3 different job company, and they haven't turned him down, but I guess he wasn't the best candidate for each of the 3 different positions that he has applied for. And I just we were talking last week, and he goes, I said, how's it going? His name is Josh. So how's it going, Josh, with this company? He goes, well, I'm still in there. Dad, there's another position that they just told me that they're really interested in, right? So when I went to work for Kellogg's, I had interviewed for a job which really wasn't a great fit for me, but I wanted to go work for Kellogg's, and I figured, okay, I'll get my foot in the door, and then I'll be able to work my way into what I want to go do. And I didn't get the job, thank God, because it's not really what I wanted to go do. It took a year. They got back to me. They hired me, right? So that was a year in my own, and that's what I told my son, Josh. It took me a year to get into Kellogg's. You're just working a couple of months here with this company. Be patient. Okay, that's the end. Are there any questions that anybody has?
We've had a lot of questions come through the chat.
Okay.
So I'll get started asking you some of those. And then if anybody wants to unmute, be sure to do that. You can ask Craig directly. So first up, with the general question, tell me about yourself. Should we literally talk about ourselves or talk more in line in a professional way, like our previous jobs?
Well, what I train my students for at the universities is I think I like to reply, let me tell you about my strengths, and keep it short, right? That could be professional, that can be personal, right? I would probably lean towards the professional, but I think we're all human. We should put, and I love doing volunteering, or my work passions are this, and my personal passions are that, right? So I think it's a great way to organize and start off short. I always tell people, if that's not enough for the interviewer, they'll ask you some follow-up questions.
When we do talk about our personal life, how personal should we get? Is there a limit?
Not personal at all. So when I was doing the mock interview session with a North Carolina student, I asked her, tell me about a difficult situation. And she said to me, well, I had this boss that was really inappropriate with me. And I said, stop. I said, that's not where you want to go with this. That's where I said, you need to think about these examples that are professional, that demonstrate your strengths and positivity, and use those, right? So even if you don't do the STAR approach, you can inventory and make a list on a pad or type out on a computer's paper the great experiences or your great accomplishments that you had. And that's what you want to draw from, okay? So I would not be personal. Okay. They can't, legally, they can't ask you personal questions, right? Really personal questions, like how many children do you have? They can't ask you that. Right? It's against the law, right? Or tell me about your health. It's against the law to ask you those questions. So it should be professional about work.
Okay, that's great. And another question that we got, is there a database where we can put in job descriptions and have words be pulled out to tailor a resume?
Yes, I can't say that I work with them. there are some free websites if you Google applicant tracking systems where it will allow you to paste the job posting in, and they'll let you paste your resume in, and then it will score how well the computer system thinks you rank for that position, like on a scale of 0 to 100, right? So that's kind of a reverse way of doing it. I'd imagine that it's probably not free. You could pay, and I know there are programs that will ask you questions like, tell me your strengths and describe your experiences, and it will draft a resume for you. I just don't work with them.
Okay, thank you. Another question was, is there such a thing as being too dressed up for an interview?
I don't know what too dressed. I guess tuxedo comes to mind, a wedding dress, a gown. I think it's appropriate. I mean, I think it's okay to ask, what is the dress for the interview? That's probably the best way. Business casual is safe. That means usually not jeans, right? That doesn't mean sneakers. It means a pair of dress pants, not a t-shirt that has a big pickle on the front of it or something like that. Or anything inappropriate. So a collared shirt, probably a dress shirt, a nice blouse. If it's a manager's position, it shows respect if you get dressed up. So I think a suit or a dress or a female suit is appropriate, but not to the tuxedo level. But ask what the dress code is.
That's great. So we'll leave our top hats at home. Another question, a great follow-up question was, what were your son's follow-up questions to his interview that you mentioned before?
What did he ask?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, to be honest, I didn't ask him what his questions were, but from the experiences that I've had with him through the other four companies that he's worked with, one was Boeing in Charleston. Can you walk me through the day in a life of, it's the word DILO, day in a life of, it's an acronym of what I would be doing as an engineer at Boeing when I start, right? If you were going to rate me successful and a high performing employee at 6 months, what would I need to have accomplished for that? I think he asked, like, how would you describe, what are the great things about your culture and what are the not great things about your culture? So those, I think, from what I recall from different interviews he's had, that he's asked.
Okay, great. Another question that's popped in, do interviewers care about volunteer work or how you impact your community?
Yes, definitely so. And using it for the interview, using it for the resume. I'll give you an example. I just want to pay attention to time. So I'm working with several North Greenville University students that are graduating that have not had internships because of COVID, right? They're marketing majors and they want to go work in marketing in the upstate. And they go, I don't have any experience, Craig. I'm really in trouble. And I'm like, okay, forget about whether you were paid. Let's talk about what is marketing, right? It's promotions, it's advertising, it's inside sales or external sales. It's let's make an outline of what marketing is. Now let's talk through what kind of experiences you've had. And a lot of times it's volunteer experience, right? And let's not worry about the dates and the employers and whether you were paid or not paid. As an interviewer or as a hiring manager, I want to look whether you have the experience. I don't have to worry about initially where you got that experience. I just want to know you have the experience. So volunteering experience definitely counts. And it's showing that an impact in a community, shows maturity too, that it's not, you're just thinking about yourself, you're thinking about, the greater community, humankind, which is why I do what I do. So yes, volunteering is important.
All right, fantastic. Does anyone want to unmute themselves to ask a question or type anything else in the chat?
Hi, this is Kirsten. I have a question. I have a question in regards to salary. I know we're not supposed to talk about it on the interview itself, but dealing with salary negotiation, what would be the best approach whenever you're discussing your salary? Or rebuttaling, let's say they come at an offer, let's say they come in at 55,000 and you're currently making 60,000 and you want the market range for that particular industry in another state is probably 70,000. How would you go about negotiating that up a little bit more?
That is a great question. Really, really good question. That would take about 45 minutes to answer. So my advice is there's a lot of great research, and I do lectures on compensation, benefits, and negotiations. So I'm not sure if you want to, Rachel, I could do that one in the future if you wanted me to. I've already got the lecture built, but you can Google a lot of that information. Usually a question will come up and like, what are your salary requirements? My son has been asked that a ton of times. Like, what are your expectations? And he usually answers, what's the salary range? Right? He doesn't answer their question. But to give you the best short answer is you need to do your homework. There's a great website, salary.com, that you can put in the job titles, you can put in the zip codes, you can find out what the market rates are. If you do your homework and you have great sources of compensation information, you can use that to negotiate with an employer, right? So if they're trying to offer you 10,000 less, then you say, look, I've done this salary.com research in the area, and the range is $10,000 to $15,000 more. Can you do better, right? Or can you give me a signing bonus? Or is there any way that we could close the gap between what we're doing? But don't sell yourself short, and don't tell them what your salary requirements are unless you really, really have to. I would keep on pushing to say, what is your salary range? And I'd be pitching all your experience that you have and how valuable you are. And then at the end, let them make an offer, and then you can ask for more at the end.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, great. It was a pleasure this evening. And again, anybody reach out if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn. I think I'm up to 5,800 connections on my LinkedIn, which has been built over 15 years, right? So it didn't just happen. And once we're connected, you can see my connections. And if there's someone that I know really well, I might be able to help open a door. Or if you're looking for some specific questions or some specific help, you can reach out to me and we can set up some time to talk.
Thank you so much, Craig, for sharing all of your information, all of your resources at your fingertips. We so appreciate your time tonight. If you missed any of this information as the slides were going, not to worry, I will be sending out those slides and information to you if you registered for the event. For those of you watching the recording, if you didn't register, email explore@greenvillelibrary.org, and I'll be happy to provide that information for you. If you don't already do so, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also sign up for our library e-newsletter. That way you won't miss other great events like this one. As a reminder, we also have databases that can help you prepare for a new job, a career change, anything like that, under Learning and Research, and then just click on Job Skills. Again, that's at greenvillelibrary.org, Learning and Research. Under Job Skills, you'll find different databases we have to suit your individual needs. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, and we look forward to seeing you at another virtual event soon. Good night.